Mr. Stanton, in the words of the inimitable John Wayne, you're burning daylight.
Term a hearing aid up.
Cowboys, the movie The Cowboys, always love that line. You're burning daylight, that's what he said.
My favorite one.
Burning daylight. Listen, I appreciate all y'all being here today. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's the May 17th meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And the first item on our agenda is my favorite item, which is if you will join with me and stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. The first numbered item on our agenda is the FY23 Urban and Arlington Henrico Street Maintenance Payments Update. Mr. Russ Dudley. Good afternoon, Mr. Dudley.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Secretary, members of the board. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of our annual process for making street maintenance payments to our urban localities and the counties of Arlington and Henrico. Am I controlling this? No, okay. So starting with the urban maintenance payments for the urban localities, as required by code, VDOT provides street maintenance payments to all cities and towns with populations over 3,500 and other towns as specifically noted in code. Each year, these localities are required to submit any additions or deletions of eligible mileage to us. Those inventory changes are eventually approved by the board during this process, and we use that information along with our new budget numbers to calculate payments to our localities. Payments are calculated based on moving lane miles available during peak travel time and are paid out quarterly to our cities and towns. For urban localities, payments are based on two categories of roads, our arterial roads and then our local and collector streets. Last year, we had a budget of just over $400 million for our 85 urban localities, which provided payment rates of $22,524 for arterial routes and $13,224 per lane mile for local and collector routes. As a condition of those payments, we do inspect their arterial routes annually to ensure that they are maintained appropriately. Arlington and Henrico are the only two counties in the state that maintain their own local roads, and we have a similar maintenance payment program for them. Like the payments to cities and towns, the payments are quarterly, but those payments are not based on functional classification of the roads. They are just based on total eligible miles maintained in the counties. This past year, we had a budget of about $72 million for Arlington and Henrico combined. They have one combined budget. And their payment rates for this year, this past year was $19,695 for Arlington and $14,331 per lane mile for Henrico. There is no annual arterial road inspection requirements for these counties. Along with our maintenance payments, we also distribute a few other payments by code and by practice along with the maintenance payments. In 2012, the DMV overweight permit fees that are collected have been distributed through our urban maintenance payment process per code. These are distributed on the basis of lane mileage to localities, and they are distributed along with the quarterly payments. Beginning in 2005, VDOT recommended a set-aside amount of $1 million to pay to the city of Chesapeake to help maintain their 3 movable bridges. They are the only locality that maintains movable bridges in the state. We also make payments in lieu of taxes to localities where tax-exempt Virginia Port Authority real estate exists. This is authorized by budget language, and we appropriate $1 million for the 4 localities that have this real estate. And those 4 localities are Newport News, Portsmouth, Norfolk, and Warren County. That's our inland port. The $1 million is distributed on a pro rata basis based on cargo throughput in those ports, and that goes along with quarterly payments. This year, for FY23, this upcoming year, 23, we have a proposed Arlington Henrico budget of about $75 million. This results in payments to Arlington of about $20,499 per lane mile, and Henrico of about $14,916 per lane mile. That is an increase for both the localities of about 4%. Just for your information, Arlington has 1,060 lane miles that we pay, and Henrico this year has 3,563 about lane miles. We will also distribute overweight permit fees to the counties in accordance to code, similarly to the urban localities. So for the urban localities, we have a total budget of about $432 million. And so this leads to the primary rates for the principal arterial roads of $24,012 per lane mile. And these are moving lane miles again. And collector roads and local streets will receive $14,098 per lane miles. For your information, our urban localities have 6,010 arterial lane miles and about 20,354 local and collector miles. They will also get overweight permit fee distributions of about $8.33 per lane mile. We will continue to propose the $1 million to Chesapeake to address the additional costs associated with the movable bridges, and we do not have the prorated numbers from VPA yet, but it will be a total of $1 million to the 4 localities.
Just one question, just for
Yes, sir.
information.
Mr. Brown?
Did Chesapeake request the right to manage those movable bridges? I'm just curious as to how they're distinct from everybody else.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Brown, this was approved back in 2005, and I don't know the specific steps of how we got there. Mr. Brule may know, she was in the division at the time, and but we did do a study, and we saw that it's extensively more expensive to maintain those movable bridges. So the board, as a practice, decided that it was appropriate to provide the city with
It's
additional
like, is Chesapeake
funds.
the only one that has the move?
The only ones that maintain movable structures, right?
Right.
Right, so the only ones that have it.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to why they didn't ask the state to maintain it as opposed to us doing the one.
I understand.
Yeah.
Good question.
Mr. Brewer don't want to answer that question. I see her sipping slowly, right?
There was another member there at the time as well, but he's not sure. Members.
Okay. There's so many comebacks for that.
Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Merrill?
Yeah, I had a question, if I may. Could you comment on, I was surprised that with Arlington getting $20,000 a mile as a very urban area, but then for the state, for the principal roles, it's $24,000 a mile. Why such a difference?
So those rates are based in legislation, so they were baseline probably back in 2014. I may have that date wrong, around that time, and then they've increased in according to our along with our budget each year. So the baseline was established by code, and then it's just increased per year. Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yes, for each jurisdiction.
Thank you.
And there's always a lot of conversation about payments and how much payments are the right number of payments, and we have a lot of that conversation with our localities.
Mr. Dudley, I have a question, because I should have asked this before, but I didn't. The increase in these payments is driven by the maintenance program, VDOT's maintenance program. So is that the total HMOF fund, or what goes, when you say maintenance program?
So I'm going to defer to our CFO
Our
on
farmer.
the actual budget and how the budget is created.
Afternoon, Ms. Farmer.
Afternoon. By the Code of Virginia, we grow both the base VDOT maintenance program and the payments to localities by the same rate, and that is the CPI rate I discussed with you in a previous meeting. I believe it's 4.2% for fiscal year 23, set in the fall when we adopted assumptions for the programs.
So it's really not, it's not based on the base growth of the maintenance program, they're just the same. Both set by statute, is what you're saying.
Arlington and Henrico were set by statute many years ago, and they grow based on the program growth that we applied to the funding, and the inventory changes in mileage for both of those localities. The cities have a program growth, and we apply that against the city's inventory that Russ's team compiles. So the funding is set, and then the distribution by mileage is done second.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Dudley, you
So next month, I'll be bringing 2 resolutions to the board, one for the urban localities and one for Arlington and Henrico for your approval. With that, I am done. Are there any additional questions?
all right, thank you, Mr. Dudley. Pardon me. Next item on the agenda is agenda item 2, Economic Development Access Program, City of Suffolk. Russ is back.
Yes, sir. I got out there.
You were
got right
really
back.
quick.
Yeah, lightning fast. Lightning fast. So this afternoon, I'm going to bring.
Welcome to the meeting.
Yes. So today I'll be sharing some information with you on an EDA allocation request from the City of Suffolk for new road access within the Virginia Port Logistics Park. Not familiar with where the Virginia Port Logistics Park is? This is a map of where it is. It's located off Route 58 near 460 with good proximity to 664 and 64 and about 20 miles from the Norfolk terminals down there. So it's a really good location for warehouses and any EDA site. So just as a reminder of our EDA program, this is a standard non-bonded allocation request. So we have bonded requests when they ask for surety. We ask for surety when there's no known capital investment coming in. This particular project, it has a known facility coming in. They haven't announced the name of the locality. We're referring to it as Project Coastal. So they have already provided sufficient capital improvement documentation, so no surety will be required before the allocation to the city. As a reminder, in February, the board updated the EDA policy to increase the maximum allocation for EDA sites to $850,000, with $150,000 of that requiring a dollar-for-dollar match. So the city is requesting a total of $710,500 to construct a 900-foot long, 40-foot wide access road. The access road has a construction estimate of about $721,000. The road will access a 1.5 million square foot warehouse/import center, which will provide jobs for 100 people. That has reviewed and concurred with the estimate, and we also have endorsements from the district engineer and our CTV district member. So turn to the next page. It's an illustration of the proposed site. We have Enterprise Drive, which is the existing road that comes down to the south and connects to Route 58, and the new road will connect to what's referred to as Project Coastal before it continues to extend throughout the industrial park. So even though this is a known facility, well, this is our first opportunity to allocate funds under our new EDA policy, and even though this is a non-bonded site that has a known entity coming in, we are now evaluating and scoring these sites. And we score these sites based on 4 criteria based on the policy passed by the board in February: capital investment, full-time job creation, the need for the access road, and the locality's level of economic distress as defined by VEDP's Commonwealth Opportunity Fund. So as you might already expect, this site scores really, really well. They've already provided us with $124 million in capital investment documentation, so we give them 40 points for that in our score card. We expect over 100 full-time jobs in coordination with VEDP. We expect over 100 people employed there, so they get 25 out of a possible 30 points on this scorecard. The need for the access road is complete. They have no access road at the time, so we give them a total of 20 points. And Suffolk is a single distress locality. They're single distress for unemployment, so we gave them 5 points for that criteria. So they scored a 90 out of a possible 100. So this is an excellent site. facility we already know is coming in, so it's a great opportunity for the Commonwealth. So the next steps is next month I will bring a resolution to the board for approval for this allocation. Following CTV approval, we will enter into agreement with the city for administration of the project, and they will administer the project and construct the new access road. So with that, do I have any questions?
Mr. Stanton.
I just want to say that this is a good deal. This company's invested $124 million in this facility. They're asking us for $700,000. Suffolk's putting in 10. It's a good deal, and it's something that we should look at favorably.
Anyone else? Ms. Dudley, one question. When we do these access roads, does the city, us, or is it the private entity own the underlying road when it's done, or the road when it's done?
So the underlying, Mr. Secretary, the underlying road has to be dedicated to public use. So it will not be the private entity. It will be, in this case, it'll be the city. The city will accept it into the urban system, and we'll make payments on it,
Right.
for street maintenance payments.
But we're providing it for their use. We're not providing it for their balance sheet.
That's right.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is agenda item number 3, the Transportation Performance Management 2023 Safety Targets. Ms. Margie Ray. Good afternoon, Margie. Welcome.
Secretary Miller. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a good day. So this is an annual presentation that we give to talk about safety performance measures and establishment of targets. And by way of background, this is a requirement from MAP 21 and the FAST Act, whereby all the states must establish safety targets, and they're done on an annual basis. We also work very closely with DMV to agree to targets for the first 3 measures, and they must report their targets to NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and VDOT reports theirs to FHWA. You can see the timelines that we have there, and that DMV has to report theirs by June 30th, so this meeting is important for us to be able to adopt the targets in time for them to use in their reporting, and then VDOT has to report their targets by the end of August. On another note here, as far as establishing the targets, FHWA also has requirements where they're monitoring and assessing a state's progress towards achievement of those targets. So I'll give you all a little more information about that. So the measures that we have to look at are the number and rate of fatalities, the number and rate of serious injuries, and then the non-motorized bicyclist and pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries. So that's a combined measure. The first 3 on this slide are those measures that we have to agree to the targets with DMV. So we want to look too on, what's happening in the past, kind of what does it look like now relative to where we've been, and then hopefully where we're going and projecting our future performance. So this slide, there's a little bit of information on there, a little bit busy. The bolded numbers are the targets that we have set through a data-driven model-based approach that you guys started adopting back in 2019. And then the lighter text for the numbers are the actual data that we've had since we started setting the targets. So a little overlapping there of information, but that's what that data represents. The left-hand axis gets into the scale for our fatalities and the non-motorized measures, and then the scale on the right of the chart is for our serious injuries. So again, you guys started, we've brought this stuff to you for several years now, adopting targets on an annual basis based on the statistical model that we've developed. We can see that this last year, 2021, as far as our known data, that numbers increased in all 3 of those 3 measure areas, especially relative to where we had established our targets as well. And these are the rates that we also have to report out on, the red line being our annual fatality rate, and the blue line being the serious injury rate. With this determination of significant progress, and that's the term that FHWA uses, assessing how we are doing in performance against those targets that we set, They do this on an annual basis, but it is always looking back in time, so the most recent significant progress determination was based on our 2020 targets and how did we perform. We did achieve our targets for 4 of the 5 measures. You can see in here that the criteria about if you've made significant progress also gets to, it can also just be better than the baseline condition that was submitted at that time. And so while our serious injury rate did not meet the target, we were better than the baseline conditions. So we made significant progress for our 2020 performance targets. Now,
So Margie,
yes, sir.
I think this is important to note. I think I'm correct, and correct me if I'm not. So if we set a target here, and it's a high target, and we're trending in a bad direction, as we all know, and we set a target that is sort of, that might be statistically predicted given where we are, right? And if we set a target that was 10% of that, we can set that target, right? Then if we make it, we did a good job. And I don't believe in that. Right? And so the question becomes, how do we, at the end of the day, how do we set the target? And we've been through this a few times before in the past. Some of us raised that issue, which is, why are we setting targets that high? A target is a terrible word to talk about when you're sort of, it's almost like you're trying to get to it as opposed to not get to it. We're talking about serious injuries and fatalities. And so we've got in our ability here, in our judgment, we get the ability to set targets that are higher or that are lower. And I tend to be the type that wants to set them lower and find a way to get there. So much of this is not in our control. And I don't want to sort of belabor it here, but if you look at our stats, the correlation between bad driving and serious injury fatalities is pretty tight. So it's not the correlation between like poor design or bad road conditions or whatever it might be. It's really the correlation between bad driving and these accidents that are creating serious injuries and fatalities. And that is a challenge for us on a transportation board because there's only so many levers that we have to pull here to influence that. And so, as we're going through this presentation, I just want you to think about it in those terms: is how do we get these numbers down? Right. So fatalities were up 8%. 1,000 people were killed on our highways last year in Virginia. 1,000 people. 28 in work zones. It's just and less vehicle miles traveled. Right? We look at all sorts of things from alcohol sales in the area to all sorts of different criteria to try to determine what's statistically significant. But at the end of the day, you see the same old things. It's speeding, it's distracted driving, it's no seatbelts. It's stuff that we all can 100% control as drivers, right? Nobody prevents you from putting on your seatbelt. Nobody makes you drive an excessive rate of speed. Nobody makes you look at your phone, right? Nobody does that. My wife's car now, I think you can sort of override it somehow, but it won't let you shift into gear in her new Suburban unless your seatbelt's on, right? It's kind of interesting. And so, all I'm saying is we set these targets. There's a couple ways to look at them. One is to set something we think is attainable that we're on the trajectory of. The problem is the trajectory is the wrong way. And we could set it 15 or 20% above what we think the trajectory is and make it and pat ourselves on the back and think we did a great job. And I just can't do that, right? I'd almost rather just not make the target and just allow it to continue and think that we're doing okay. We're not. Right? So we've got to find a way, and I'm sort of a proponent that hold yourself accountable and find a way. And so you've got this significant progress towards in terms of baseline, and then you've got your target. And I'm pushing back, in essence, on having targets that are just reflective of where we're heading, as opposed to where we want to go. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, just to bring that full circle, can you remind us of the consequences of failing to meet the target?
So
Yes.
there's two measures, right, Margie?
It's up there on the slide, the third bullet. So that if we don't meet the targets, we need to submit an extra report to FHWA by June 30th of each year, basically stating what we would do to achieve that target. And then we also have to obligate 100% of our highway safety funds, which we are currently doing. And, as you all might recall, we do prepare an investment strategy. You guys recently adopted one in January, which addresses kind of some new funding that will go to localities for systemic treatments, also just some of those strategies that we would use to help drive down the numbers. So in a sense, it really helps support us if we had to do that extra reporting. So that's a fairly easy step for us. It's extra work, but it's easily done.
That's your question. And Mr. Brown, to sort of, not to go on and on about this, but in the 9 meetings we had across the state over the last few weeks, which were quite interesting, I'm really glad I was able to do it. Traveling for 9 days isn't, when you're young, it's cool. When you're not young, it's not as cool. But it was cool, okay? And it was because there's lots of enthusiasm, there's lots of people that are interested, there's lots of good stuff going on. But as I traveled around the state, I talked a fair amount about this. And something that just is so apparent to me, in that we put all this money and focus into the construction and the way we engineer roads. And there are more rumble strips around than there ever have been, right? And occasionally I'll find one that reminds me. And all sorts of things of that nature, right? Lots of things we're trying to engineer into our roads, design into our roads to make them more safe, the road themselves. But yet these numbers keep going up. And so it makes me think about, and I'm the guy who's just goes crazy with the people in the left lane who just won't get out on the interstate. And I see the disruption to the flow of traffic, and it's substantial, and I always wonder, do they not know or do they not care? Which one is it? And being trying to be a half full guy, I'd say maybe they just don't really know. They really don't understand. The point is, most of us get our driver's license when we're 15 years old. All of you have heard this because you were in those meetings. But you get a driver's license when you're 15 years and 8 months or whatever it is. For me, for some others at this table, that's more than 50 years ago, almost. 50. Nobody gave me any more training. Nobody made me sit down and do a refresher course. Nobody sent me a video to watch. Nobody did anything. And laws have been changing. Every year, the laws change a little bit. And I bet you a lot of money that if I passed the driver's test out to everybody in this room today, we would have a pretty high failure rate. So why is that, right? And I'm not a guy who wants to see a lot of regulation and make people go through necessarily for training and get recertified. Although you could make that case. You certainly, as you have aged drivers, there's sort of that thing that comes into being with some of them. But how much work do we do on the driver education piece? How many PSAs do you see? How much stuff do we push out that talks about the things that create these problems? So we used to have these pretty good campaigns, take it or click it or ticket, whatever it was. We got some cool signs up that we've seen, some variable messaging signs. I just think we need to do more. I think we need to highlight it more. I think we need to talk to people more. Certainly enforcement's a huge problem, but that's not because they don't want to enforce the law. It's because they're really strained. State police are really strained, as are other law enforcement bodies. They're strained, one, they don't have the number of people, and two, they got all sorts of bad stuff happening. They got to worry about it's more timely, I guess, more urgent than sitting on the side of the road and watching for people that are violating the law. But anyways, I just think we need to be thoughtful about that. I've challenged the commissioner and the DMV folks they're really the highway safety office, right? And tell us what we need to do. Where do we need to put some resources? Because the numbers are just going up with less miles traveled. And it was 1,000 people died. If we could cut that to 800, we just saved 200 lives. We markedly changed a bunch of people's lives, including, of course, the 200, but everybody that's impacted by that. That's just huge, huge impact we can have if we can find a way. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but it's bothersome. I think we need to figure out a way to do more than we're doing. Mr. Kaspertz.
Yeah, this is a conversation we've had annually for as long as I've been on the board. I guess my question back to you is, what do we do as a transportation board to help impact this safety statistic that we're presenting when most of it is well beyond our control? Speed enforcement is perhaps the single biggest issue that we have absolutely no control over. So what do we do? I think everybody here is anxious to take steps to help make this number better. But I don't see anything within our purview and our responsibility as board members that allows us to make a substantive difference here.
Education. Holy pulpit. We've got a budget here. Our budget is how many? What's our total transportation budget for the period?
For the Highway Safety Improvement Program, it's roughly about 60 million is what we're putting towards it.
Well, but there's other ways to get money towards what I'm talking about as well.
Correct, but Mr. Secretary, if I might be able to address what Mr. Kaspertz is talking about, is that I do think that in December we talked about, brought DMV and the department together through one singular budget that we addressed and brought in a 6-year plan. Part of that was a suite of systemic improvements that dealt with infrastructure and then behavioral educational components. And I think what the Secretary is saying is that the challenge that he has given back to the department and to DMV is to re-look at the components associated with the education component, the behavioral side of the equation, and look to see if that money's being put into the right places, knowing what we know today. And that's a part of the challenge that I think Margie is going to address near the end of this, and I thought the Secretary might go there too, is to put this back into, give us, I think, 3-4 months to be able to pull this together and ask that question if those monies are being placed in the right places.
So the Secretary mentioned education. One of the things that we have as a large transportation organization is the ability to show definitively in the data set where speeding conditions exist and to the extent that they exist above the posted speed limit. One of the tools that would really be helpful in doing this would be to identify just how significant speeding problems are on a segment-by-segment basis of roads throughout Virginia. And that's an education component that I think we could be useful in providing. We can't do much about it. We can certainly identify it through some of the data sources that we currently have.
And we can pinpoint
Can pinpoint.
even more specifically where the accidents occur. I mean, at the end of the day, where the accidents occur is where the real problem exists, if you will.
To some extent, but habituated speeding in certain of our corridors. I came down yesterday and the average speed in the center lane was 85 miles per hour and 95. And we know where these areas are. We also have the tools to show them in a way that we haven't done it to date to provide more definitive information on where enforcement needs to occur and what the consequences of these accelerated speeds are from an accident perspective. That's actually the second step in it from my perspective.
Secretary Miller, if I could speak to that, we do have efforts underway, and it's been underway for some time. It's both DMV, through a contract with Virginia Tech, is working on a tool for the interstate system that is near real-time data, looking at speed and crashes, really with their target audience of the state police. In the meantime, OIP, along with VDOT, has been working on a tool that's for the non-interstate system. Same thing, looking at the speeding and crashes and some other geometric things, weather, things like that, that we can build into this model. As far as schedules for those two tools, the Virginia Tech tool is looking at a phase 1 to be complete by October. We are working on having a prototype that can be played with, utilized by June next month. And then in that strategic plan that you all approved back in January, you also approved some funding that would be for building out that tool to its full network coverage, because right now it's not covering the entire non-interstate network. So that would be underway come July or so.
Secretary?
Yes, sir.
Did you say that June will have the first pilot of the speed study program that we started a couple of years ago? So that is I think a significant step forward. Will allow us to identify for the first time the actual speeds and the excessive speeding that's occurring on some of our primary roadways. Is that interstates only or primaries as well?
DMV's tool is focusing on the interstate. We're focusing on the non-interstate. And our tool has a little bit more of a focus of historical data, so that you're starting to look at, where are we seeing the trends and the patterns. So not just kind of this one-off, maybe we've got a speeding circumstance here. The other tool for that Virginia Tech is developing for the interstate is, they're calling it near real time, because the data, by the time you even get it into a tool, is going to be a little bit delayed, and where you're seeing some problems. But it's also going to help them as far as putting together the grant applications for them to be able to do the enforcement. So it's all kind of designed around some of their use cases to help them get what they need to do exactly what you're suggesting.
Glad to hear that's progressing. Margie, thank you.
Secretary?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for your comments on safety, because I agree with you. If we just sort of set these targets, don't do anything differently, we can expect the same results next year. And so what about our opportunity for an advocacy position? I mean, why not require a driver's license renewal test every 4 years with an update on what legislation has changed? I know that would not be popular, but you think about hands-free driving or texting, the passing lane regulation that has passed. I also think there's an opportunity to better use our message boards. I go up and down 81, and 90% of the time those message boards have no messages. I think there are ways that we could have those flashing lights in construction zones. When you go past those, make those more alarming, make them red if you are more than 10 miles with the speed limit. So I think there are a number of things that we could do if we're serious about trying to impact this.
Mr. Rucker.
No, I was about to say, I think we all take the seriousness of these matters. We take seriously these matters, and we want to do everything that we can from an advocacy perspective. I have to step back on renewing the driver's license every 4 years. I think there are certain things that we are not factoring in. People are not getting their licenses at 15 years and 8 months anymore. I work with young people every day. A lot of them don't have licenses at all. They rely on Uber and other mechanisms for getting around, and they don't drive as much as we do. How do you factor those folks into the information here? Distracted driving. We're talking about speeding, but distracted drivers. We drove down together this morning on the same vehicle, but as I was being passed by vehicles, which were flying down the interstate, the number of people who were on their phones is frightening. It's absolutely frightening. Whatever we can do to educate these individuals and whatever advocacy we can participate in to enhance that, the knowledge of the risk associated with that is critically important.
Well, let me be clear, Mr. Rucker. I'm not advocating to have a relicensure every 4 years. I'm not doing that, and I'm not going to do that. But I do think there's opportunities to educate and to use the bully pulpit and to talk about and to push on. And to Mr. Kasperitz's point, to point out to enforcement where we see things and where they might be able to help us. That's where I am. Mr. Kaspertz.
I was going to say that we are now apparently close to having the ability to actually show areas of consistent driving above speed limits. It'd be incredibly helpful when we have this conversation next year to have a presentation, a sensitivity map, if you will, perhaps of the Commonwealth in its entirety to show where our speed issues are. And in doing so, we fill that educational role that you described, plus we provide a useful tool for those who are on the enforcement side of this. It's really hard to say just how significant the speeding problem is until you create a data set that shows what's actually going on in the Commonwealth. And that helps us in every regard. Maybe some of the infrastructure dollars that we're spending to straighten curves should be spent for enforcement and have a much greater bang for the buck than putting in lane delineators or the vibration strips and the like. These are decisions that are hard for us to make because we don't have the data set that tells us just how significant these speeding issues are.
And we're going to move on with the presentation, but I think we have to be, as I know you would agree, we have to be thoughtful in that we don't necessarily have a really great mechanism to fully analyze where people are speeding. We have two data points. One are called tickets and the other called wrecks. And so if there's not enforcement in certain places, and then, you know, like I'll give you an example. Midtown Tunnel and the downtown tunnel in Norfolk, these are anecdotal because I use them. I think they're 30 miles an hour or 35 miles an hour, and nobody goes 30 miles an hour. It's 50 or more. And I would bet you there are no tickets that are given in those tunnels. It's because there's just not enforcement in the tunnels, right? So there's great speed, way excessive, and our data will never pick that up. So we just need to be, you know, I hear you, and I think we're doing that. But where you don't have enforcement, you don't have data. And other than anecdotally, Cedric said everybody's doing 85 in the middle lane, right? Or you said that, one of y'all said that. In any case, I think they're all good comments. We're coming, we're on that road, Mr. Kaspertz. I just think we need to keep talking about it, and whether you're 18 or whether you're 23 or whatever age you get your driver's license, the point is there's not a lot after that happens, right? Even if you just had to watch a video, you know, something. But I just, you know, these people are dying. I mean, these aren't like we're having some fender benders and there's some property damage. We've got 1,000 people that die every year. It's, you know, multiply that by 20 in terms of who they impact. And beyond that, it's just, you know, we've got to do better somehow.
Almost 20,000 serious injuries.
It's Mr. Kaspertz.
Margie, will you be presenting the June findings of that first speed study in any formal way, or is this something that we can gain access to?
We certainly can look at some opportunities for that. If we get the prototype, we could send a link out. The prototype is only a small representation of the non-interstate network. It's something, again, just to give us that, get the look and feel, get the queries, get all of everything that makes sure it works before we do the full network coverage. So we certainly, so when I say that it's a good representation of urban and rural roadways, and just distributed across the Commonwealth so that we could just test some various things as we were building this out. And this is segment-level analysis.
Let me answer that because I set the agenda. And we'll have opportunities to see that information. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I hesitated to make this comment because I thought I knew where you were going, and maybe Ms. Ray is going to get there. But I don't know that this is as complicated as we want to make this as far as data sometimes is valuable, but sometimes it's also, the answers are also obvious. And you were talking about education, and we talked about various methodologies for that. And I thought what I was going to hear you say is that, you know, we ought to maybe as opposed to investing so much in the structural improvements that have limited benefit when we know that it's behavior, that we ought to be investing more in behavioral education, and whether it's a required, recertification, or whether it's simply more TV, right? TV ads that click it, we all remember those ads when we were younger, with regard to distracted driving, with regard to drinking and driving, and I think there's evidence that those campaigns actually had a benefit. And so part of why I spoke up here is I'm just kind of wondering, are we stuck in the paralysis of analysis, or could we just be doing something?
No, I think perhaps you were more clear than I was, but that's exactly what I've asked the commissioner
Okay.
and others to tell us what to do
Okay.
in that regard. And I've talked about that in 9 separate meetings across the state, that I think we need to do more in that regard. What exactly those things are and what they look like are for them to come back and tell us. But doing nothing is not an
And
option.
we're not going to wait for a bunch of analysis. to
No, I
determine
mean, listen, we've got plenty of analysis to
Right.
know what's creating this. Now, where they're created and where you might want to focus, to Mr. Kasperitz's point, is valuable, right? But if nobody had this bad driving habits, I'm not sure they look at their phone more often in County X than in County Y. They just look at their phone, right? I don't know if we get more drunk driving in County Z than County B. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But to your point, so I just think there's more we can do. And there is some money we can move around and target different places, and we can work with our legislators as well. So, thank you. Let's move.
Sir. So this is a process that you all have seen several times now, a statistical model that we update and refine on an annual basis. As the first step, I'll go into a little bit more information on that. The second step is where we look at projects that are programmed that will be completed within kind of early of 2023 and include 2022, because that's data that we don't have. All the data comes through to 2021. And then step 3 is just combining the output from both of those steps. So when we talk about the model and how we update and refine it on an annual basis, we're adding to the, another year of data to the data sets that we already have. We also look at some of the other potential data sources that could help us understand and be useful to us in impacting what happens with our crashes and serious injuries, or fatalities and serious injuries. But then we also need to calibrate that model. So we do that annually. We use the prior year of data, so the 2021 actual data, to validate the model. And then based on some of the trends that we've seen through time, VMT growth, things like that, we will update the model to predict those 2023 baseline values. So what you see in the chart at the bottom of the slide is the result of that prediction model, so that we're predicting by year 2023 baseline targets of fatalities at 1021, serious injuries 7,551. You can read that. But so that is the result of updating and refining the model.
And let me say this, we didn't drag you through all this data, but the model is unbelievably predictive, accurately predictive in terms of looking backwards. So when we take the model, I think we were off 2, 1, or 4. It was unbelievably accurate, which is great, but I didn't like the answer. Thank you.
So this next slide just shares with you all the factors or variables that we're looking at and putting into the model. And the chart shows us that where we have the upper red arrow, it results in a kind of a negative consequence, and that increases our crashes. And then the green arrows can help drive down our crashes. And so what we've really seen over the last few years, there's some consistency here, is that the VMT growth is always a large contributor to this. But we're also seeing a lot with our functional classification of the roadways, especially that lower functional class. Younger population is definitely a demographic that is of concern, and we see that in the numbers regularly.
And Mr. Brown, although this doesn't show you the degree, there's only one line that has 3 green arrows in it. What's it say?
Behavioral spending.
Behavioral programs. To your point. Ms. Ray?
So just the types of things that we look at. We look at other things too, but those things are not found to be statistically significant within the model. So these are actually the same variables that were in last year's model as well. So then step 2 is where we look at those programmed projects, and we look at the SmartScale and the Highway Safety Improvement Program projects. We only have data through 2021, and so this is capturing data that we could help influence the outcome of our target setting process and the results. And so we looked at, then we look at those and we bucketed them into the spot and corridor projects. Those tend to be a little bit more expensive, very geographically limited in extent typically. Our hybrid projects are something that could be a little bit more of geographic extent, kind of mid-price point. And then the systemic improvements are things that we can do a lot more for a lot less money. And we've kind of showed you all some of that in the past too. And your recent action on that strategic plan in January really targeted the systemic safety improvements as the methodology and the investment strategy that we think gives us the biggest bang for the buck. With this, looking at these individual projects, we identify the crash history at those project locations. We look at the scope of the project and how those project scopes will help address the types of crashes that were occurring at those locations. We do use a SmartScale similar methodology for scoring this or evaluating this, but then we look at those annual crash reductions by crash type so that gets us to an output that we can understand and assess. So we looked at 200 SmartScale and Highway Safety Improvement Program projects, and over an 8-year time period, there were more than 5,500 fatal and serious injury crashes at those locations. In the table to the right, you can see the output of that analysis such that we can look at spot and corridor projects that on an annual basis we anticipate a reduction of 2 fatalities as a result of these projects. The bottom line in that table is the summation then of our spot and corridor projects, the hybrid projects, and the systemic projects. So that bottom row is just through that investment, what we would anticipate as reductions in crashes once those projects are constructed. When we evaluated just the cost of those projects, what it costs to construct them, we really can see that return on investment is kind of reaffirmed that systemic projects provide typically about a 50 to 90 times greater investment than our spot and corridor projects. So I think it reiterates the point and the strategy that you all have adopted. So then step 3 really is just the combination of those from step 1 where we had what our model predicted, and then step 2 being what are the benefits we see of programmed projects. We subtract out those anticipated reductions and get to step 3, the bottom row, which would be our proposed targets for 2023, certainly caveated with what the Secretary referenced earlier in the discussion. So as a result of this, coming back next month, we would anticipate that we would have a resolution for you all to take action on those targets. And again, that's largely driven by the schedule that DMV has to submit the targets to NHTSA and the fact that we have to agree to targets for 3 of the measures. To the extent that there is thought that we would want to adjust those targets, we certainly can consider that and provide whatever information may be needed to assess that or make any, to assist in that discussion. So that's all I had on this presentation. What we did, though, is we charted this just so we can kind of continue to see through time what's happening with both our projections as well as what's actually happening through time. So again, the data through 2021, you can see that our targets based on the trends, we are looking back in time and making some assumptions that some of those trends will continue. Some of those things might be a growth assumption with VMT or other trends. What do we think is going to happen? And so based on those trends that we've seen through time, we are still seeing similar trends in the wrong direction, especially for fatalities. Our serious injuries seem to be leveling out a little bit. We're still looking at probably a slight increase. And then our bicycle and pedestrian targets are dropping just a touch.
So if you look at slide, you're on 13.
13.
So you can see where we are, top piece of the graph. You can see where we're heading. The question is, do we accept a target 1,012, which is what we predict, where we predict we'll be if we believe in our model and we don't do anything different. And that's what I'm having trouble with. And, we've done it. This isn't unique to me, right? we've had this discussion before, going back over the course of the years, but I just have I just can't sort of accept. We just say, well, this is the way it's going to be, so that's what it is, so that's the target. I'm just not good with that.
Secretary, I was going to ask you a question, Margie, too. So the federal government's making all these guidelines, is that correct?
They prescribe the
All
measures
right,
that
so
we have
if
to
we
do, but
don't-
not the methodology.
Oh, we don't go with their guidelines, they just keep money from us?
No, they just required us to make sure that we spend it all, how they might think that we should spend it, and we are
And I'm
already
good with
doing
that. We're already doing it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'd rather have the pressure of not meeting the targets. If I got a kid at home, right? The kid is perfectly capable in school. And they're messing around and not getting where they need to go. And they ought to be an A student. They're a D student. I dropped the target to C because they're a D. Is that really what I should be doing? I just think we've got to hold ourselves accountable and find a way to get to a target that we're comfortable with, not one that we think is just going to happen based on what the predictive model says, even though it's been accurate. And I understand Mr. Kasperitz's point, which is what things can we do? Well, one of the things we're doing, as you showed in the slides, is in terms of the construction piece or the engineering design piece, we're looking at systemic improvements, not spot improvements, because we get a much better return. So all those things together, but I do think, Mr. Brown, we ought to try to find ways to change behavior. And I recognize it's difficult to do, and we only have so many levers. But I just, when you think about those numbers, it's just, from 700 to 1,000. That's annual. So over that period of time, if it happened every year, right? 2,500 people, gone. Merrill.
Has there ever been any consideration to having electronic monitoring the speed like they do with the toll tags, and to notify drivers how far over the speed limit they're going?
We do that some places. Certainly do it in the cities. You got signs all the time, or not all the time, but you have signs that tell you. Yeah. I don't know what our.
I mean, in terms of sending somebody, I'm
I
talking
don't-
about sending,
you know, I
sending
really
somebody,
don't-
sending
I-
somebody a notice that,
Listen, I've never been 85 on the interstate when I didn't really know I was going 85. If it was 60. I'm not sure. Now, does it help? Sure it helps. In the cities, I would tell you, and in sort of those places that look wide open, that are 30 miles an hour, and they look like they're 60-mile-an-hour roads, I think they help there, particularly when you're not familiar with them. I learned that one time. But
a ticket or a crash.
no, there's no crash. No. But I did meet the local constabulary. Listen, we're not going to solve it at this table today, but I think I'm just looking for some support, that we want to encourage our folks to bring us back some additional things that they think we can do to have an impact, and not just say, check the box, move on.
Yes.
Not that that's our attitude before, but we are where we are.
Yes, so Mr. Secretary, I think, to the point, we talked about this earlier about tasking VDOT and DMV to work together. I think that we would look toward probably the September timeframe to give us time to really evaluate some of what we're doing, what's working, what's not working, try to be a little more targeted, especially on the behavioral side. So clearly that's DMV assisting with that, and bring that back to the board, because, we would agree that, when we look at our infrastructure spending, it's not making a big enough impact to our outcomes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. And just so that people are aware, I think it's in your presentation that the last three slides, they're heat maps. Sometimes we get that question of what's driving these numbers. And so just to understand what's on this table. So these are the emphasis areas. Mark Cole gave you a presentation in January on the updated strategic highway safety plan. And so these are through the data analysis and discussions with multiple stakeholders. They identify certain areas to target for either behavioral strategies or investments and things like that that we want to look at. So when we look at this matrix it's the same on the X and the Y matrix of the impaired driving. If I take that one across, like I can see how that behavior of impaired driving links with our roadway departures, and I can see that I have over 7,000 fatalities or serious injuries through that intersection of those two things. Many times when there's a crash, there might be more than one behavior involved, and so that also gets reflected in this. But I can also have somebody that maybe is speeding and then runs off the road, but maybe they were also driving impaired. So this is a chart that combines the fatal and serious injuries, and then the next two charts just get into the breakout by fatalities versus the serious injuries. But just in reading that, understanding that, this is where we see where the real problems are and where we maybe can target some efforts.
Thank you.
Sir.
Any other questions? Thank you for the robust discussion. Next item on the agenda is item 4, Rail Industrial Access, Stanton River Plastics. Ms. Balderson,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hope you're well today.
Sir?
I hope you're well today.
I am so far. Hope I stay well.
Well, we'll try to make sure you stay that way.
Until I do my first flick.
That's a half-full glass right there. You trying to send us a message, Ms. Balderson, or was it just me?
No, that was just
You being you?
Just me being me.
No worries. Talk to us.
So today I'm here to present to you an industrial access application. Stanton River Plastics is located in Pittsylvania County. They have asked for $450,000 to rehabilitate a spur. They are moving into an existing facility, but also building out and adding several other warehouses. The company specializes in plastics, injected molded parts for the beauty, food, beverage, healthcare, and construction industries. And this plant is going to focus primarily on plastic bottles. The spur will be utilized for incoming materials only at this point, and they will be importing plastic pellets. They will ship their finished products via truck. They have a nearby customer already established, and they also have national customers primarily in Atlanta and Chicago. The project was publicly announced by Pittsylvania County in late 2021, and the company has indicated that they would not have chosen Virginia if not for the rail service and our strong workforce and very business-friendly culture. This is just a location picture. It shows they're just located north of Danville, and they are in Hurt, Virginia, along Route 29.
Balderson.
Just a question, I'm just curious, it's plastics, is this recycling at all, or the pellets that come in, or is it just pure new product? I just wonder if they do recycling.
They do not recycle at
They
this
don't
facility,
recycle
no.
plastic.
They're just primarily making the packaging and shipping it out.
But are they using recycled plastics at the,
They did not indicate to me that if they were pellets, they're coming in from the Gulf Coast, but they didn't indicate if they were from recycled products.
Secretary, I was going to answer on that. No.
no?
No.
Okay.
Been there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, please continue.
So the proposed, the spur is already existing, as I said, and it's shown here in red. And this is along the Norfolk Southern Main Line. They are going to be rehabilitating 2,129 feet of track for a total cost of about $650,000. They're investing $16.5 million in this, in their new facility, with rail being $650 and $650,000, and they're requesting $450,000. So they received a score here of 18. Since it's a new facility for them, they have 0 existing carloads and 170, projecting 170 new carloads per year. They are going to be hiring 101 new people, so they got the full score here of 20 points. And if you look at the local unemployment in Pittsylvania County is higher than the state average, so they received 8 points, and they were also supported by the Economic Development Partnership. So they received a total of 64 points. For total project benefits, the vehicle miles travel avoided are 365,000, right over 365,000, and truck trips avoided are right over 2,300. 612 tons of greenhouse gas avoided for this project, and this is over the 3-year performance period. We have a 15-year interest period, Commonwealth interest period in these projects, so if you multiply that out, it's got a significant public benefit. So yep, this is the monetizing the additional benefits of this project, and Jen wanted to speak on that.
I just wanted to add that we're working with the commissioner and his team to look at the data that informs our model. This particular project, in terms of pavement maintenance savings, shows $15,000, and I think we all agree that that is a terrific underestimate of what the real value of moving these products by rail is. So
2,300 trips in a heavy truck.
yeah. So we're working with them on updating the model. We always lean towards the conservative side on estimating the benefits of the project, but I think we've been far too conservative, particularly as it pertains to maintenance cost.
You know, I don't want to belabor sort of the data, but if we avoid 365,000 vehicle miles, and the truck trips are 2,300. If I divided truck trips into vehicle miles, show the average vehicle miles per trip that I was avoiding, get a number that we would probably have a long discussion about. So we can probably do some more work in that regard. They'd be like doing the circumference of the United States.
Mr. Secretary, I got some more information for the board. First of all, this is in Hurt, Virginia, which is right across the Stanton River from Alta Vista, which is halfway between Lynchburg and Danville. I visited the site Friday afternoon. The site was a Burlington textile mill, 1,300 jobs that were lost in 2006 as textiles declined. One of the last Burlington plants that were open. It was a brownfield, and the county took the property, eliminated all the structure, and built a huge building, and this will be the first tenant. And by putting this first tenant there, it's going to galvanize even more tenants in the future. It's a huge building, and it's a reclaiming of a brownfield site that spent a lot of time. And again, the job market, particularly in northern Pennsylvania County, and obviously Pennsylvania County, some of you know, is the largest county in the state of Virginia as far as square miles. And it'll be a real good addition and will propel, hopefully, additional people, companies will be using the site. And as far as access, it goes across 29 business, but the deliveries will be done at night. So there'll be no impact as far as stopping traffic, and it's a very unused road that much anyhow. It's right below. It just opened a new bridge. As some of y'all remember, a picture that we had, a video of a bridge with a train going by recently. That's in Alta Vista, and that's right across from the town of Alta Vista, where the site is located in Hurt, Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Dudley. We'll endeavor to ensure that these numbers are or make more sense. But the bottom line is, we're bringing 100 jobs, helping bring 100 jobs to that part of the world, and that's pretty good stuff in and of itself.
That county's been hit hard with textiles and tobacco.
Sure have.
Losses.
Any other questions? Yes, sir, Mr.
I was
Coleman.
going to ask a question. Is this for domestic consumption, or is some of it going to be going across our ports?
It's for domestic consumption right now. They are going to try to work with the port to see if they can, and some foreign customers, once they are build out this facility completely. It won't be within the first 3 years, but they do plan to talk to the port and some foreign customers as well.
Okay, thank you. Be a job for the VEDP.
Thank you, ma'am.
They are working with them.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the inflationary cost drivers for 2023. Ms. Laura Farmer, welcome back.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Today, I
Afternoon.
would like to talk to you a little bit about some cost drivers that VDOT has been monitoring for some time now, and their anticipated impact and what we'd like to do to prepare for that. So over the last few months, we've been reviewing the ongoing impact of commodity pricing, fuel price adjustments, and inflationary costs to both the agency's activities that we carry out day in and day out, as well as the contracts that we enter into to deliver our maintenance paving activities as well as construction projects. We believe that these increased costs are above the planned CPI growth that we have built into our maintenance program areas, as we mentioned earlier with city street payments. The most immediate impact is related to the cost of fuel and how that mechanism is used in the agency's expenditure activity. With the chief engineer as well as the chief of maintenance and operations and their corresponding staff, we've reviewed two of these significant areas. Our current contractual commitments, we've already entered into our paving season commitments for this current calendar year, and those base assumptions as we entered into those contracts. We also reviewed the agency's fuel usage and the price per gallon that we are able to acquire for just our day-to-day operations. It's important to note that the paving that we've committed to in the plan for the season supports those performance targets that the commissioner as well as Kevin Gregg brought to you previously. In terms of approach and methodology, this spring we took a look at our historical pricing for fuel as well as our usage. We also calculated from the contract perspective the fuel price adjustments that we have embedded in our contracts as well as the asphalt price adjustments, and created a range of potential options based on the sustained price of diesel and unleaded fuels. I'd like to just give you some perspective that these are other areas on this slide that the agency is continuing to watch over the course of the next few months. Our hauling costs related to material delivery, our snow removal contracts that we'll begin activity on at the end of the summer. For equipment, we're already seeing price and supply impacts on the orders that we place. And we're also obviously watching the price of steel and other commodities that go into our construction prices. So to get through this period of time, we have recommended and implemented some adjustments for our final 6-year financial plan and budgets that you will see reflected in June. I'll go through some details in the next slide, but what this does is establish program reserves in both VDOT maintenance and operations program, as well as our financial assistance to localities, those city street payments that Russ described earlier today, that can be released at a later time period once we see how the prices and their effect on our activities play out over the next couple of months. So we're going to evaluate those price adjustments throughout the season and then recommend releasing that reserve once those impacts are known at the beginning of calendar year 2023, or the end of our paving season and after we get those last invoices in. If a small miracle happens and we don't need any portion of this or all of this, then those funds would be released in 2024 for distribution. So when we looked at this information, our results are summarized in this table. For the fuel for VDOT operations, we recommend a reserve of $24 million. For the fuel and asphalt adjustments embedded in our maintenance paving contract activity, with the estimate that our diesel fuel will be maintaining at about $5 per gallon in terms of cost to the department, is $81 million. And then corresponding, because we don't get a lot of detail, we don't get any detail from the localities about their spending activity, our recommendation is for the total base maintenance funding, the locality share makes up just over 23% of that total, and so we would establish the same reserve for the city street payments, and that would affect their third and fourth quarter payments if we got to the point that we would determine we would release this reserve. And so the total impact is $129.3 million as a reserve for these cost drivers.
See how it adds up.
In terms of actions to be taken, we would establish these reserves and the assumptions, allocate those to the respective program areas. As I mentioned, we would hold them, evaluate the activity over the next 6 to 8 months as we get into early 2023 and determine whether VDOT's experience over that time period would allow for the distribution of these reserves to cover costs. We're still dealing with the same amount of money, so it's important to note that this action would reduce the money available for construction distribution, but also knowing that this is a one-year recommendation right now. As we get through the next couple of months and understand how permanent some of these cost adjustments are or temporary, we'll know more to inform development of the next update of the program for 2024 or sooner if something happens due to the economy or the revenue forecast. We also anticipate a workshop briefing later this summer to come back to you to help give you an understanding of what we're seeing related to commodities. And that'll likely be Mr. Thrasher that will come and talk to you about that. With that in mind, that concludes my prepared remarks. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Secretary. This may be a question more for Commissioner, though. I'm just curious, with this huge increase in diesel and fuel prices, what's our policy on electric vehicles, and are we anticipating purchasing more? I know that some vehicles can't be electric, but you know, how can we avoid some of these gas price increases with the purchase of electric vehicles?
So, Mr. Secretary, if you're referring to what the department's vehicular fleet is referred to, most of what we're looking at, we have an ongoing evaluation of where we can introduce electric vehicles into the fleet to be able to provide the services that we're looking at. Some of what we have today cannot be accomplished with the existing fleet for towing or for weight restrictions in the range of services that are available, but the Chief of Maintenance and Operations has a group looking at this in response to some of the work that was undertaken under the last administration in trying to look at vehicle fleets for the statewide basis. So that's an ongoing evaluation that we have. To be able to address it today, you look at the Ford Lightning and the 150s and what is available, it's simply not available today to be able to meet our needs, but we might be able to introduce it as those products become available to us in greater form for us to be able to acquire them. But this is an ongoing evaluation.
So do we use any electric vehicles today?
I don't believe so. We have hybrid vehicles that we have in the vehicle fleet today, but strictly electric, the answer is no, but we continue to look at them.
Look at that to see if we can.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes. And we have to marry up the usage and the ability, and are those vehicles available to meet our needs? And so we're evaluating that. What we see today is those vehicles are not available in the fleet or available to meet our needs today. But that's an ongoing discussion that we have.
Thank you.
As well as life cycle costs.
Life cycle, yes.
Yes, sir. Mr. Stanton.
Does VDOT ever attempt to enter into long-term contracts for fuel or asphalt?
Mr. Secretary, the answer is no. We don't. I think what you're looking for is a hedging of what the fuel and other commodities would be. The answer is no at this point in time. We have
It's a little late now to think about it, but.
Well, it is.
But I tell you one thing, we did it to Chesapeake Bay, and we've got it locked through end of July, when, of course, we will fill up every available swimming pool and tank with diesel fuel.
I mean, not to come over for your next barbecue. I'll pass on Memorial Day swim.
Don't tell the EPA that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Kasparitz.
Laura, thanks for the presentation. Is there a labor component to this? We're looking at the cost of fuels and asphalt material that are increasing outside of, I guess, our normal parameters. I would guess at some level labor is as well. Is that something that we're looking at and starting to reserve?
Let me address that. The answer is yes, we are looking at it. We're doing two things. One is there's an increase that is coming across the state, increase in wages that's coming out. But we're also doing some salary survey, if you will. Not sure if that's exactly the right word, but study, market survey on comparable positions, and that's something I'm looking at now. We're not prepared to come to you with the impact.
You may be back to us on that.
We may be back to you on that. It's not in the range of 140 million or 130 million, but it could be real.
Still real dollars.
And at the end of the day, there's a balance as there is everywhere. Our people work hard and they're capable and smart and they deserve to be paid what they're worth. At the same time, we want to make sure we hold the taxpayers who give us the money and hold them in regard at the same time. So we're looking at that. We're looking at it position by position, and we're just not prepared to give you that yet.
So are we looking at that for our contract workforce as well? Which is going to be a cost driver in escalating, I would assume, new contract prices, but there may be some built-in escalators for existing contracts as well.
I don't think that we have any.
Mr. Secretary, for contract-related work for the maintenance and construction, that would be all included in the bid price. From a consultant standpoint, we do look in an escalation factor on an annual basis that would be included in those contracts for professional services. But as far as maintenance and construction prices, those are built into the bid price at the time that the bids are received. Market fluctuation with regard to asphalt and steel adjustment and other factors are looked at, and that's why we're taking a very close look at the commodity pricing that is out there in other areas.
Secretary?
Yes, sir. Who said that? Mr. Brown.
Is it safe to assume that if we find that this is an inflationary spike and it starts to normalize next year, that the dollars that we pulled out of the specific programs and districts will go back pro rata into those districts? I mean, you didn't say that, but I'm assuming that that's what you intend.
Say that.
Did she say that? Did they go back pro rata, or do they just go back into the funds?
So
I see what you're saying.
Right, they would, so the $129 million, if we don't need any of it, it would become available for allocation distribution, meaning that it's part of VDOT's funding for the HMOF and construction. It's already in the HMOF, so it would then reduce crossover next year, and so more be available for construction.
It'll go back to the regular formula process that it went through the first time.
Mr. Secretary, I think what Mr. Brown is alluding to is, has this gone back to a particular district? And the answer is no, this has not been allocated to a district, or it is off the top. I think Ms. Farmer can say that. So this is not going to impact an individual district per se, it's off the top.
Taking it off the top, and it's going to go back into the big pool. I thought in one of the slides it talked about allocating from pro rata from the districts. That's why I wanted to see whether we were going back to the districts.
Understood.
top.
Yeah, I
Okay.
understand the question.
Off the top, okay, all right, I'm good.
Anyone else? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
You know, I'm hopeful, and I'm no oil expert or pricing expert, to Mr. Stanton's point, there hadn't been a big need for hedging in that business. You know, the change has not been substantial in the last numbers of years. And the price of a barrel of oil doesn't is not reflected in the price of the change in gasoline prices. So I don't know exactly how that works, but I'm hopeful that some of this comes back to us. If it doesn't, you just looked at 130 million times 6 in a 6-year plan, and you know we're at $800 million. It just evaporated into inflation. So it's a real problem, and
Mr. Malbin assures me that it's all going to work out.
that's what he told me. Well, Mr. Malbin, we thank you. And we'd be happy to accept any contributions for the marginal difference if there is some. Thank you, ma'am.
Sir, I'm up next.
The next item is Laura's as well. It's Northern Virginia Transportation District Bond Defeasance recommendation.
Sir, this next presentation just covers 2 administrative items that you'll see in your June board packets. I just want to give you a brief overview of what they represent. With regard to the Northern Transportation District program, in the early 90s and into the early 2000s, the General Assembly authorized a program called the Northern Virginia Transportation District Program and enumerated the list of projects that needed to be delivered using bond proceeds. At the time, the program was funded by recordation taxes from the localities affected in the district, right-of-way fees, or what we call telefees, that you'll see in your secondary 6-year programs in other localities in Northern Virginia, and telefees belong to the Northern Virginia Transportation District program. VDOT completed all issuances of planned debt in 2009, totaling just over $477 million of the total authorized $500 million. Since that time and during that period, the board took advantage of refundings to maximize interest savings. And we determined that the remaining authorization right now does not appear to be needed. The projects that were authorized have been delivered, and we don't plan to issue the current debt difference between $500 million and $477 right now. As planned, the bonds will be paid off in 2034. Based on recent adjustments in the last couple of fiscal years, it's important to note from the state revenue perspective, the NVTD fund receives $40 million a year from the CTF off of the top of the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. And then that $40 million is also allocated to the WMATA Capital Fund as $20 million. That began in 2019. And the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority also receives $20 million, and that began in 2021. The other sources to the fund also continue. The right-of-way fees or telefees from those localities are dedicated. There's also contract revenue bonds. This slide enumerates the outstanding bonds related to what's remaining in the program in each series amount. There's a handful of project commitments still outstanding, but the debt service commitments are programmed, and the program has fulfilled its purpose intent. After May 15th, the bonds are available for refunding from 2012. Due to the legislative commitments in the last several fiscal years of this program, we believe it's more advantageous for the agency and the board to defease the 2012 series of bonds. The authority to defease is not enumerated in the Code of Virginia, and so we believe CTB approval is necessary to allow Secretary Miller to approve the defeasance of this series of bonds. So that action item will be prepared for you for June to consider. The other item is just simply a shelf refunding resolution. So every 2 years in June, the last couple of years, you have seen me come before you with what we call a shelf resolution that allows us to move forward with refundings. So the board has to approve a refunding transaction. It then moves to Treasury Board for their approval. And sometimes in the past, that 1 month lag may diminish savings. But I would note that these types of transactions are few and far between now that we can't advance refund bonds any longer. But we like to have this permissive authority in place. So the resolution that will be brought before you just indicates that we will follow the Treasury guidelines, that we will not extend any maturity of any debt if we choose to refund bonds. It also allows us to advance the action to the Treasury Board and creates a 2-year period for this refunding authorization. So in June, these 2 resolutions will come before you for your consideration, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item number 7, SmartScale budget increase request. I-81 exit 300, Ms. Kimberly Pryor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Nice to see you, ma'am.
Today I will be...
In Richmond.
In Richmond, yes.
For a change.
For a change. It's nice to be back. Today I'm presenting to you all a proposed budget increase for SmartScale project I-81 exit 300 southbound in the Stanton district. I'd like to point out that I also have the district engineer Randy Kaiser here in case you have specific questions about the project. Just by way of reminder and background, significant changes to the scope or the cost of a SmartScale project do require reevaluation and in some instances approval by this board. The I-81 exit 300 southbound acceleration lane extension project was submitted by the Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Commission in round 2 of SmartScale. The original total project cost was $3.4 million. It was fully funded with high priority funds at the time. The original scope included extension of an acceleration lane onto I-81 southbound from westbound I-66, as well as widening the existing southbound bridge over the Water Plant Road to accommodate the extended acceleration lane. The project is VDOT administered and has been advertised. You may recall in June of 2020, I brought this project before this board for a budget increase. The board did approve a scope revision and a budget increase that was associated with that scope revision. The major reason for the change was because the original scope included a bridge rehabilitation and the revised scope included a complete bridge replacement. This was due to the presence of 2 factors. One was a reactive aggregate that causes expansion of the concrete in the presence of water, which degrades and compromises the bridge components. In addition, the cost to rehabilitate the structure was determined to exceed 65% of the replacement cost, and by policy, when those conditions are met, we recommend replacement over rehabilitation. The approved budget increase back in June of 2020 increased the budget to $8.5 million, and this was an increase of $5.1 million using deallocated high priority funds. Again, just a reminder of the location of the project on I-81 over Water Plant Road in the vicinity of I-66. VDOT advertised the project. We've received bids and we've determined that the price proposals are responsive and represent good competition. The estimated budget required for the award is slightly shy of the approved budget by about $750,000. This represents an increase of 8.8% over the current approved budget. We've determined that the shortfall is due to increased unit prices for asphalt and stone. There are sufficient allocations, high priority deallocated amounts available to cover this increase. The table below shows the original application cost and score, the impact of the previously approved budget increase, which revised the score from 11.1 to 4.5 and dropped the ranking of the project. This current change does decrease the score from 4.5 to 4.1, but there's no change in rank based on this proposed increase. So the recommendation for action this month, as the bid is pending, is to approve a budget increase of $750,741 from deallocated high priority balances. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions? Mr. Brown?
Not so much related to this project, but the 26 million nine, is that statewide high priority?
Yes, sir.
Let's. Cushion money?
Secretary.
Yes, sir, Mr. Dodson.
Mr. Brown, is that the bridge right where 66 comes into 81, right near Front Royal? Is that the bridge?
It's just south of that exit where 66 intersects, and you're going south. And the 81, also the 81 project includes making 3 lanes down to Strasburg. So this will tie into the 81 project.
Because the traffic coming off 66 and you put 81 going south and 66 going west, it kind of conjugates there. Gotcha. Thank you.
It's bad on both sides, both going north onto 66 to go
So the
east
2
as well
lanes
as going
could be
south.
becoming a 3rd lane. Thanks.
I thought what Mr. Dodson was going to say is that Mr. Merrill came on the board and the project went from 3.4 to 8.5, and now it's going to 9.3. And how these city slickers are up there, you know?
You're coming from healthcare. I'm glad that there's some industry that has a higher rate of inflation than healthcare.
Extermination. Did digress, did we not? That is the end of the workshop agenda items other than the director's reports. So I'm going to call on Ms. Jennifer DeBurle to talk to us about the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, all the exciting things that are going on.
I think I'm going to focus my remarks on the exciting things going on at DRPT on WMATA today. It has been a challenging few days to work through issues with WMATA. I will start with the issue of the Metro Rail operators and their recertification. You may have seen this in the media yesterday that over half of WMATA's rail operators are out of compliance with the agency's own policies and recertification requirements. This was an issue that was identified by the Metro Rail Safety Commission, communicated to Metro. Their chief safety officer then did a more detailed investigation and went to the Metro Board of Directors in consultation with Metro Management and took action to take 72 operators immediately out of service, which reduced service on the Green Line and started yesterday Green and Yellow Line service, and developed a corrective action plan to bring them back into compliance again with their own policies and procedures. Following that, there was also a Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission order that was issued this morning that had to do with power restoration on the rail system, and this is for periods of time when the third rail power needs to come down for either work being done on the tracks to protect their employees or their first responders in the event of an accident. And there were situations where Metro, again, was bypassing their own safety requirements, safety redundancies and policies involving the repowering of the system when work was going on. So that MSC order came out today. With that, there have also been some changes in leadership. Many of you are aware that Paul Wiedefeld announced his retirement. He's the general manager, announced his retirement effective June 30th. The Metro Board did a thorough and exhaustive search and identified last week Randy Clark, who's the executive director of CAP Metro in Austin, Texas, as the new GM for the Metro can't even talk anymore, Washington, D.C. Randy is a very seasoned professional with experience with the Massachusetts Bay transit system in Boston, the T. He's worked on safety issues for the American Public Transportation Association. He is a very vibrant and innovative leader, and so we're looking forward to having Randy join the team here in Washington. He'll be here towards the end of June. Given everything that's happened over the last few days, The board of directors and the board chair, who is a Commonwealth's representative on WMATA's board, announced last night that Paul Smedberg was retiring effective immediately, and the chief operating officer of WMATA resigned effective immediately last night. These are signs that clearly there needs to be a change in WMATA's safety culture and the collaboration within WMATA to maintain that commitment to the traveling public. We need WMATA to be successful. We need WMATA to run well. And most of you have heard me talk over the last series of public meetings about how important it is to rebuild confidence in our transit systems coming out of COVID. This kind of stuff does not help us. And so getting that safety culture in place, that safety message that Metro is there and ready for the riders as they come back to their offices and travel is critically important. And so that is the focus of my report today, and we will be working with the secretary and deputy secretaries on how we push that point moving forward. Mr. Secretary, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. Let me just weigh in a little bit on that. Thank you, Jennifer, for your report. You know, WMATA is a complicated beast. It's got the feds in it, we're in it, Washington and Maryland. And it does some complicated stuff, right? And I'm frankly not an expert on WMATA. The concept that you could have for drivers of your trains not certified for over a year, more than half of them, not one, know about it, or two, do something about it. It's not a complicated matter. You know, that's not engineering where we don't understand why things are happening the way they're happening, and I'm certainly no engineer. But to keep a list of things that you got to do, it's sort of like telling the officer when he gives you a ticket for driving down the highway with a license that's 3 years old that you just didn't know and you're sorry. It doesn't go over real well, right? They say, well, you should have known. So here you got an organization that's spending billions of dollars that should be sophisticated. And, you know, that's just outrageous. It's just outrageous. And as I said, I'm not a WMATA expert, but I'm becoming one quickly. And I can tell you that the government that I'm a member of, that talks a lot about best in class, is not well represented. And I don't mean by our representatives there, but is not well represented when an organization that we put as much money into as we do performs at this level. It's just something's got to change. So I can tell you the governor on down through me and others are extremely focused on this organization and how to make sure that it is successful. Because the director's point, it needs to be successful. It deserves to be successful. And it's a complicated organization. Lots of entities with their fingers in it. Still, it'd be sort of like, can you imagine the FAA came out and said, oh, by the way, we didn't get our pilots recertified. Half the pilots have been flying around for the last 18 months, have not been recertified. Can you imagine that happening? I just can't imagine that happening. So it's just, you know, we just have to do better, and we're going to demand, frankly, that we do better. What form or shape that takes, I'm not exactly sure yet, but I think we're very focused on wanting to make sure that they're successful, and that we do things to help make sure they're successful. And if they're not being successful, that we hold them accountable to get them success. And so that's sort of where we are. You know, it's been interesting over the last 24 hours to read some of this stuff. So,
Mr. Secretary,
Dr. Smoot.
Thank you for your remarks, and thanks to Jen, who briefed the subcommittee this morning, we did talk about this, and it is really important, not only to the Commonwealth, but to this country, that WMATA function in an effective manner which serves the needs of people at our national capital. I hope the board of WMATA is focused on this. I suspect they are. But it does suggest that there has not been the level of attention over the years necessary to prevent these situations. And in the words of Queen Victoria, we are not amused. So I'm glad the message is being sent, and thank you.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, I got one question for Jennifer. So I don't get to the weeds of it, but they didn't get recertification. Is recertification online or is it in person? Because the pandemic, a lot of areas you can get recertification, particularly I know through the state you can.
I can't speak to what WMATA's practice is, but I would say that there are many ways to certify professionals in their trade, and to do that electronically would not be out of the realm of possibility. So Metro Rail Safety Commission identified this as a concern, and if there was a pandemic-related cause, then I do not expect that they would have identified that.
So do y'all see a decrease in ridership when people are thinking, these people are not trained and not held accountable, the safety factors, et cetera, so instead of using the train, I'll get back in the car and drop a bus?
Of course.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If I may.
You know, we've already, Mr. Dodson, we've already had the problems with some of the design on wheels and so forth on the various trains. And I sort of alluded to them as being a little bit more complicated than did you get your recertification or not. So there's already a culture, excuse me, there's already a concern by some about safety. That includes crime, which hasn't been, perhaps by some accounts, beyond the pale, but the whole fare evasion thing is not something I can subscribe to. We let people jump over the turnstiles and you just watch them do it. I just don't know what to say about that, other than, you know, when you let people break the law, you get more lawbreakers. That's what happens. When you let them do it, there's more of it. We talked about enforcement on our roads. We wouldn't need enforcement if people didn't do it. And when there's less enforcement, there's more of it, period. That's the way it works. So, you know, just some of my understanding, again, I'm no expert on WMATA, I'm not even close. But people tell me there's sort of silos between safety and operations, right? And I can tell you, if I'm the new guy coming in who has a very good reputation, by the way, that would be the first day we would have that addressed in a meaningful way. And I can tell you, I mean, for those of y'all, most of y'all, all of y'all have been in a meeting with me around the state. And what is the first thing I tell them is the mission of VDOT? Safety. Safety. You know, when I go to the port board meeting, the first thing they do in the meeting is they have a safety briefing in the board meeting. Just the culture, right? And so to me, it just blows my mind. And it doesn't matter to me about, I don't care about COVID. If I'm on the board of WMATA, my people don't tell me that my drivers, by my own policy, are not being recertified timely, then I don't know what to say. If you come to me and say, listen, we got a problem, all these certifications are going to expire, and we don't have a mechanism, and you're dealing with it, and you're talking about it, and you're figuring a way around it, that's one thing. But if you believe the board, they had no idea until they found out Thursday. And I would have been, you know, it wouldn't have been pretty. So, you know, it's just, that just goes to show you sort of what it's a bigger problem than just the recertification, right? It's always what else is there that you don't know about, right? If that's happening, what else is happening you don't know about? So there needs to be a radical change. I'm hopeful with the new CEO who's got a pretty good reputation that will come, and I can tell you that to the extent or to the level that we can impact that, we're going to impact that. We're not gonna just sort of accept business as usual. We own part of this, and we're going to demand that it be run in a safe way, in a well-managed way, so that it's best in class, just like we're trying to do in everything that we do in Virginia. That's what we're going to do. Any other questions for Director DeBrule? Commissioner Britch.
Mr. Secretary, I don't have any updates for this month. I think as we look forward into the coming months, as Laura or Ms. Farmer presented, we will be providing another update on the commodities and what commodity prices may have an impact in the future for construction and maintenance activities. This is a concern as we start going into planning for next year already for SmartScale and what available funds that would be available for distribution in the 24 fiscal year, the 24 fiscal year. So more to come on that topic, and I would envision that happening at the July meeting and having the chief engineer give an update. We are watching what's happening in the marketplace very closely. Other than that, Secretary, that concludes my comments.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I was going to ask you on the meetings you had throughout the state, were you greeted with wine and roses at every event?
Sir, I can't tell you that anybody did a better job in the Lynchburg district.
You trying to make me feel good or something, Mr. Secretary? It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Can't tell you because you'd get mad at me if I did.
That's good. Good. You set me up on that one. Thank you.
Let me say this. It truly was a good experience, a really great experience. I met a lot of people, heard a lot of wants and needs. We drug Kim and Laura and the rest of the team around to every corner of the state. They did a great job, by the way. Staff did a great job.
How was the helicopter flight?
Excuse me?
How was the helicopter flight?
It was interesting. I have to tell you, we saw some stuff that I would have never seen if we hadn't have done that. I saw a box culvert that would blow your mind of what they're doing in the Q corridor Q, out in Southwest, and some of the stuff going on out there. It's amazing. But the team was great. The local folks in each place we went did a great job. Participation was interesting. We had a sort of a gentleman's over/under on how many speakers we were going to get, right? And I was thinking we'd probably get more in Northern Virginia, but we didn't. We got more in Southwest Virginia and other places. But it was really good. It was a good experience for me, and I appreciate the work everybody did. And Lynchburg was particularly well done, Mr. Dodson.
Well, you just met our city manager, who's a Hampton-Sydney graduate, so that helped out a lot. Thanks.
Former assistant city manager of Norfolk, Virginia. Sir. We've got a member or two that's going to, that has some things they've got to attend to. And so as we move into the action meeting, I'm going to defer any break. If somebody needs a break, as I get a little deeper into the meeting or past a couple agenda items, we'll take a short break. Is anybody going to want a break, or are we good to keep going? Mr. Stan says keep going. So with that, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board, the action meeting here on May 17th. I'm going to defer the public comments and the approval of minutes, and I'm going to go straight to the Maintenance Division's presentation by Mr. Prezioso.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
You too. We have several items on the agenda this morning, or this afternoon. We have the first naming we have today is in the Bristol District. It is the bridge naming of the Kenneth Kinney Fannin Memorial Bridge. This is Route 871 in Scott County. The county has requested that we name that bridge for Mr. Kinney Fannin. He was a United States Army veteran from the Korean War conflict. After the war, he later went on to become the vice president of Robinette Steel there in Big Stone Gap. Mr. Fannin was a railroad enthusiast. He also helped found the Duffield Days there, which is he was a chairman there for over 36 years, a local celebration they have in Scott County. Eventually, he even opened up the Fannin Railroad Museum, which was a free railroad museum for visitors to visit. He also served on many local boards, so it wasn't just about him. He was a great community servant as well. He was part of the Lonesome Board Hospital Board. He was part of the Chamber of Commerce. He was on the board of the Virginia State Parks, Mountain Empire Community College, the County School Board, the County Planning Commission, the Industrial Development Authority. So he was a great enthusiast of railroad. He was a great supporter of the community. After all of those years of selfless support to the community, Mr. Fannin passed away in 2021. The Department of Transportation has reviewed the resolution from the county and recommends your approval.
Mr. Folks,
Mr. Secretary, I move approval.
is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Folks moves and Mr. Johnson seconds. All in favor, please rise and signify your approval. Thank you. Motion is approved without dissent. Mr. Prezioso.
Next on the agenda are 6 items that were brought forward to us by Henry County. They submitted these 6 bridge naming requests to honor local law enforcement officers who lost their lives in the line of duty.
Mr. Chair, if the board is in agreement, I recommend that we let Mr. Prezio make a presentation for each of the 6 Henry County naming requests. And at the end of the presentations, I will make a motion for the board to consider the 6 namings in a block vote.
Without objection, please proceed.
First of these items on the list here is for Officer George S. Frame. Officer Frame was a member of the Bassett Police Department, and on March 18, 1923, he was killed in the line of duty. The Henry County Board of Supervisors has requested that we name the bridge on Route 1228, which is Governor Stanley Highway. It goes over the Smith River. They've asked that we commemoratively name that bridge the George S. Freeman Memorial Bridge. Second item is for Deputy John Hughes Mitchell. Deputy Mitchell was a member of the Henry County Sheriff's Department. On May 4th, 1922, he was killed in the line of duty. A resolution, the County Board of Supervisors has requested that Route 609, Daniel Creek Road, over the Smith River, be commemoratively named the John Hughes Mitchell Memorial Bridge. Third item is for Officer John J. Johnston. Officer Johnston was a member of the Henry County Police Department. He was killed in the line of duty on January 27, 1945. A resolution, the County Board of Supervisors has requested that we name Route 701 Field Avenue over the Smith River to be commemoratively named the John J. Johnston Fielddale Bridge. Fourth item was for Deputy Paul Edward Grubb. Deputy Grubb was a member of the Henry County Sheriff's Department. He was killed in the line of duty on July 2, 1989. A resolution, the county has requested that the bridge on U.S. Route 220 over the William F. Stone Highway, that's Route 220 over U.S. 58, be commemoratively named the Paul Edward Grubb Memorial Bridge. Fifth item on this list is for Deputy Willis Herman Ferguson. Deputy Ferguson was a member of the Henry County Sheriff's Department, and he was killed in the line of duty on March 18, 1975. A resolution, the county has requested that we name the bridge on Route US 220 over Reed Creek be commemoratively named the Willis Herman Ferguson Memorial Bridge. The sixth item in this grouping is for Investigator George Melvin Brown. Investigator Melvin Brown was a member of the Henry County Sheriff's Office. He was killed in the line of duty on June 26, 1984. By resolution, the county has requested that the bridge on US 220 over the Smith River be commemoratively named the George Melvin Brown Memorial Bridge. Mr. Chair, VDOT recommends that the board approve the requested commemorative bridge namings in Henry County for George S. Frame, John Hughes Mitchell, John J. Johnston Fielddale, Paul Edward Grubb, Willis Herman Ferguson, and George Melvin Brown.
Smoot.
Mr. Chair, I move the board adopt and block these resolutions as presented to us today, approving the following commemorative namings as already read of the specified bridges in Henry County.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Smoot moves and Mr. Dotson seconds. Before I call for the recognition of the vote, let me say that last week we had our memorial to law enforcement officers that were slain across the Commonwealth, the Patrick Henry building led by the governor and the secretary. And today, serendipitously, but appropriately, I think, is the last day of Police Week across the country. So with that, I'd ask those who want to signify their approval of the motion, please rise.
Thank you.
May be seated. Let the record reflect that the motion was approved without objection. Thank you, Mr. Prezioso. Thank you, Dr. Smoot.
Thank you.
Now we will revert to our order of agenda as was published. And the first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to comment today? Hearing none, I'll move to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes from the April 19th meeting. They've been distributed in advance. Are there any comments, questions, or changes?
Move that we adopt.
Second.
Mr. Rucker moves and Mr. Merrill seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Now to the Office of Land Use, Mr. Hofrichter, action on transfer of routes F906 and F907 from the primary system to the local system of roads. Pittsburgh District, Mr. Dodson.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hofrichter.
Good afternoon, Secretary Miller.
Welcome. Nice to see you, sir.
Members of the board.
Beautiful day.
Yes, sir, it is. The city of Lynchburg has brought before you, or sent to us, requests to transfer frontage roads F906 and F907, totaling 92 hundredths of a mile, from the primary system to the local system. They function as local roads. They don't function as primary roads, as frontage roads at this point. District has reviewed it and found that that is an appropriate action.
Any questions for Mr. Hofrichter? Your motion?
I make a motion, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Dotson moves. Is there a second? Mr. Merrill seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Hofrichter. The next item on the agenda, Location and Design Division, the action on limited access control changes for I-495 express lanes. Next, Mr. Hetzel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Hetzel,
members
nice
of
to
the
see
board.
you.
Nice to see you, sir. This is a relatively routine item. The changes in limited access along the corridor are being precipitated by the addition of some sidewalk and shared use path network. We've followed our environmental processes in this endeavor and have achieved federal concurrence on the changes, and they have been approved by our chief engineer.
Any questions for Mr. Hetzel? Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Rucker moves. Is there a second? Mr. Brown seconds. Any other questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great day. Mr. Pryor, back in Richmond again.
Again, sticking around for a while this time. I have 3 items for the board's consideration today. The first is my monthly transfers. I will point out that this month's transfer report does include the transfer the commissioner mentioned last month of the Transportation Initiatives funding in the amount of $93 million to the Hampton Roads Express Lanes network. And other than that, I recommend I recommend your approval.
Any questions for Ms. Pryor? Agenda item 3. Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
Move the motion be approved. Thanks.
Mr. Stanton moves.
Second.
Mr. Johnson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Action number 4.
My second item is the amendment of one project to the 6-year improvement program. It is in Chesterfield County and Richmond District. It is a signage replacement along Route 1, funded with local funds, and I recommend your approval.
Questions for Ms. Pryor? Mr. Brown?
So moved.
A motion for Mr. Brown. Mr. Williams?
Second.
Mr. Williams seconds. Any further discussion?
Mr. Secretary, what is the replacement signs? What names are they replacing?
Do not have that information.
What's this new sign says?
I think it's just to rename it Route 1, actually.
Points them towards Lynchburg this way.
That's going south. Richmond Highway or is Jeff Davis Highway Route 1 and replacement signs?
It will be renamed with Route 1 as the name.
Okay, thanks.
New name. So I think we have a motion, we have a second. Further discussion? In favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. The next item, Ms. Pryor, is item number 5. SmartScale project second budget increase.
Yes, sir. This is the project I just briefed the board about, $750,000 budget increase for a SmartScale project so that we can award the project. And I recommend your approval.
Mr. Merrill.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Merrill moves. Mr. Johnson seconds. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much, Ms. Pryor. Welcome back to Richmond.
3 for 3 today.
Our next item on the agenda is item 13, our favorite item, always. Bids. Mr. Hennion.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary.
Welcome, sir. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. I'm here today because I'm seeking board approval for the award of 4 projects which exceed $5 million. First project is a design-build project in the Nova District. It is the widening of Route 29 in Fairfax County. We received a total of 3 technical proposals, and the selected design builder submitted a price at $66,855,000. It was below our estimate range, and we recommend for award.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Rucker moves. Mr. Casper seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. G38.
G38 is in Bristol District. It is the Route 460 intersection project at Corridor Q in Buchanan County. We've received one bid. It's Bizac Construction. The bid was just a hair under $28 million, and it was within our evaluative estimate range. We recommend for award.
Secretary, move approval.
Second. Folks. Mr. Folks moves, Mr. Johnson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you. F-89.
F-89 is the Stanton District I-81 acceleration lane from westbound I-66 in Warren County. Our low bid, we had 5 bidders. Our low bid was $7.1 million, and it was within our evaluative estimate range. Triton Construction is the contractor. We'd recommend award.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Merrill moves. Is there a second? Second. Mr. Williams seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Order number G09.
09 is in Richmond District. It is the I-95 southbound ramp at Route 1. It's located in the city of Richmond. We had 3 bids. The low bid was just under $8 million by Alan Myers. It was within our evaluative estimate range, and we recommend award.
Mr. Brown?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Mr. Brown. Mr. Rucker seconds. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, you said it was within the range. You said it was $2 million over what y'all had estimated? Maybe I'm not reading these right.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Sorry, what's the question?
You said it was within, of course. Is it $2 million over what the estimated construction cost was?
No.
Okay.
No, it was within a couple $100,000.
All right. Let's read it wrong.
The material has, the report has $2 million variance, to your point.
Got you.
The bid listing, the very end is page 90 of the attachment.
You go to G90.
He's running the meeting.
G09.
It says the bid amount is $7.9 million, and the estimated was $5.9 million.
Mr. Secretary.
You tried to get out of this time.
I was trying to, sir. I knew you'd pull me back in. It's kind of like a bad Godfather movie. 3 days
Yes,
vacation,
sir. Mr. Thrasher.
So, to Mr. Dotson's comment, that was the design engineer's estimate, which is done about 6 to 7 months prior to. The evaluative estimate, which is what we're comparing it to, which is the apples-to-apples, the construction estimate, was within 2 or 3%. I don't know exactly what that number was.
Okay. All right. Just want to be sure.
Make sure I clarify.
A couple $100,000, I think, was the
Okay. I just want to be sure. I'm thinking I'm not having sleep or something over here.
No, sir, you're correct.
All right, is there any further discussion? We had a motion and we had a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions?
One abstention.
Mr. Williams abstains. The record reflect. All right, is there any new business before the body? Again, just let me reiterate my thanks to everybody for the work that they did and coming to these meetings around the state. I think they're pretty important. We got plenty of work to do, folks, and I appreciate everything that y'all do to do that work. And got great staff working for us. I see that, get to see that every day, so that's pretty exciting. And we're in a good place, but there's plenty of challenges ahead. Yes, sir, Mr. Stanton.
The next meeting scheduled for Richmond?
Next meeting scheduled for Richmond. I'm working on the getting around piece. I've just been getting around a lot. Carol finished the sentence for me that she's well able to do.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, Mr. Stanton.
We think about bringing the wives up next meeting.
I will want to say one thing. The Governor's Transportation Conference is set for
October 26th.
October
26th.
be in Virginia Beach. And so please put that on your calendar. We'll have a meeting down there. Mr. Stan is helping us with some arrangements down there as well, and
I assume you're planning on having the meeting on the Tuesday before the transportation conference starts on Wednesday.
yes, sir, that'd be the plan. Yes, sir, Mr. Merrill.
As new members who have not been to a transportation forum, is it recommended that we attempt to
Yes, sir.
attend? Okay.
I will tell you, the last one that we had was not as robust, and perhaps as some previously. It's our intention to make this robust. You know, when I've gone in the past, some of them, they've been pretty darn good. You know, there's an opportunity to learn about what's going on and meet some folks. So I would encourage you to do it, and we do try, Mr. Merrill, to have a little bit of fun while we're there, a little bit of camaraderie, a little bread breaking.
It's a good event.
Yeah, so we'll be down in Virginia Beach. Hopefully we'll have good weather in October, and I'm sure you will try to make sure it's well worth your time.
What were those dates again, Mr. Secretary?
26, what is it?
26 or 28?
26, 27.
Social, okay.
Conference.
Wayne's very
But just
social.
as a reminder to board members, if you choose to attend the conference, you don't have to do anything other than let me know. I will register you and handle all of your lodging. You do not have to do anything but let me know.
We'll send one out in the next day or so just to affirm those dates. It won't be detailed in the agendas, but we've got, you know, we've got places to hold the meetings. We've got hotel rooms booked, et cetera, et cetera. So we're ready to go in that regard. And if there's anything that y'all particularly want to have us consider as our focus, I'm sort of interested in technology and some things going forward, but it's not all set in stone yet. We're working on it. So I'm certainly taking input, and just send me an email or send it to Carol or Steve.
Has a hotel been selected?
Yes, the conference is going to be at the convention center, and I think we have rooms at the Marriott.
Okay, so the conference. will
Marriott
be
on the ocean.
At the convention center, not in a hotel?
That's correct.
Okay, because usually it's in a hotel.
It's where they felt they needed to have it in order to accommodate what we're going to try to do. Well, have a great day and have a safe day. Thank you very much. Meeting's adjourned.